Chapter 2, Workforce Safety and the Wellness of the EMT. Our objectives for this chapter is we want to talk about the emotional stages of grief. We're going to talk about how to deal with death and dying patients. We're going to discuss the effects of stress, how to manage stress. We're going to talk about something called a critical incident stress management or critical incident stress debriefing. We're going to talk about some diseases, standard precautions in PPE or personal protective equipment, some cleaning techniques, EMT preventative health, so how can we stay healthy, and then some wellness principles. So the emotional aspects of emergency care. Let's talk about our feelings. What do you guys think as EMTs or clinicians, what are some of the feelings that we can have either on call or because of the job? Stress. What else? Blame. Guilt. Depression. Irritability. Yeah, absolutely. All of those things. What are some positive things that we can have? That was really dark. We got super dark and negative there. What are some positive aspects of EMS? Confidence. Yeah. What about fulfillment? What about like elation or joy? Gratefulness. Yeah, you can total accomplishment. A lot of the times too, this job has taught me a lot of gratefulness. To where it's like, holy moly, we walk into a small apartment complex and we have 3 families in a single bedroom apartment and kids are sleeping on the floor. And I'm just so thankful that man, I really think I want a bigger TV this year. That's my problem that I have. And there's kids sleeping on the floor. It makes me great. It's perspective. It makes me grateful for all the things that I have. I'll be honest with you guys. Some of my highest highs and some of my lowest lows have been because of this job. I felt days where I could do everything perfectly and I was Superman and there wasn't a thing that I couldn't do. And I felt days where there was nothing that I could do right. We're going to have patience that we can do things perfectly at the perfect time that are going to get better. And we're going to have patients that we're going to do things perfectly at the perfect time and they're going to get sicker. But we need to figure out how to deal with that in a positive way. So the emotional stages of grief, there's 5 of them. And you're going to deal with all of them at some point in time. The 5 stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And these don't necessarily come in order one by one by one by one by one, but eventually you go through all 5 stages until you can accept what has happened. So denial. Why did it happen to me? Or this couldn't happen to me. I'm too good at this. There's no way this could happen to us. The anger. That's why me. You get frustrated and irritated. You don't understand what was going on, so it makes you angry. The bargaining. If I did this differently, maybe it would have been better. Or if we do this way, or if I could do that again, would this change my outcome or would this change that outcome? And then your depression. You just start isolating yourself. You get down on yourself. Nothing seems to be going right for you. And then finally, after you've processed all of those other 4 stages, you learn how to accept the outcome regardless of what's going on. And it's just, okay, I'm not afraid to address this, or okay, I am content with what is happening or what's going on. Appropriate care for the death and dying. So if we have a loved one or a family member or even a patient's loved one or family member and they're super sick, what can we do to help that person or that family member? Comfort them, right? We want to maintain their dignity. If we can, keep them covered up. We want to be respectful. We want to communicate to the family. Be realistic with the expectation of what's going on. Don't give them any false hope. A lot of the times, if we have this super sick patient, the family member asks if they're going to be okay. A good response is something along the lines of, my guys in there or my girls in there are doing their best, and that's what we can do right now. I don't have any further information for you, or we're trying to do the best that we can and just be honest with them. Or if that patient is coded or if that patient passes on, you have to be direct with it and you try not to sugarcoat it. I'm not saying telling them, sorry, sir, your son is dead, but be direct with it. Sir or ma'am, your loved one is now passed on, or they're no longer with us. just to help that healing process start as soon as possible. If we can use a gentle tone, use a gentle tone. So that's not the time to have that machismo, big boy, big girl voice. Lower your voice and be respectful to them. And then comfort the family however you can. I've had a couple times in my career where we've had these really, really sick patients. Some of them have died, some of them have not. And I'm on the engine waiting just to clear the call or waiting for law enforcement to get on scene. And you can see the family members visually distraught. I was talking to them and kind of did one of the put your hands out kind of thing. And that led to a full embrace. And that person grabbed me and held me, and you just hold them there. As long as you're comfortable with it. If you don't like to be touched, if you don't want to do that, I'm not telling you to do that. But it felt right in that moment in time. There's also been times where I've kind of did and they didn't bite on it, and my hands go back in my pocket. But also, you have to read the room. Sometimes that's all it takes is that little bit of comfort to help that healing process for that family member, for their loved one. Stress. What is stress to you guys? This class, absolutely. What else? Worrying about something, right? So by definition, it's a state of worry or mental tension caused by a difficult situation. Being in class is extremely stressful. Wanting to perform is extremely stressful. Finances is extremely stressful. Family interactions is extremely stressful. There's a lot of things that can factor into us being stressed. We can have long hours at work. So everyone's like, I want to be an EMT and work 24 hours until you work 24 hours and sleep for 0 of it. And then you go into your slumber. Also, there's a lot of departments out there that do 3 days straight. That's a long time, even to be away from home. You've been away for even longer than that, right? So where life goes on at home to where you still need to make sure that home is good, but you're also good at work. Shift work, having this constant like day on, day off, day on, day off, day on, day off type of thing. As soon as you get to days off, it's nice, but in the shift work, it's brutal. Personally, my schedule was day on, day off, day on, day off, day on, day off, day on. So we did a 4-shift rotation, but I got mandatoried a lot of the times in my middle days. So I ended up going 3 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on, then my 4s or my 6s. Being gone 6 out of 7 days is tough, especially if you have a loved one at home, right? So the shift work, boredom between calls, idle hands do the devil's work. If we are bored in between calls, we tend to create our own little bits of chaos, working too much. Guys are getting mandatoried quite a bit right now. But also people are just like, oh man, if I can pick up this extra overtime, then I can get this X, Y, and Z. And guys do it all of the time. So where you see your vacation or the toy that you want and you do it, you're like your calculations, you're like, 6 overtimes? All right, I'm in. It's tough, man, not being in control. Who likes to be in control? I very much so like being in control 100% of the time. And if something's not going my way, I will exude my will into the situation to where I feel like I'm in control. We're going into uncontrolled scenes all of the time. A lot of us are like, he probably has OCD. Because when you open the bag, I have 4 bags set up exactly the same way with the exact same stuff and the exact same everything. But that OCD or that organization helps you be ready for that next call. You guys are going to get to organizations where when you open up a cabinet or a drawer in your rig, it looks exactly like this. And if it doesn't look like this, something's wrong. And that's going to help you with that regularity, but it's also going to help you with your rig checkouts. So when you open something and something seems missing or off, you kind of know where to start from there. Making life and death decisions can be extremely stressful. Should I go left? Should I go right? Should I do this medication? Should we lie them flat? Do they need oxygen? Do they need a medication? All of these things can lead to more stress. Fearing failure. How many of you guys fear failure? I fear failure. I still feel failure. It's okay to fail here. Not the class in general, but as we learn and practice these things, I want you guys to achieve failure and do things wrong so many times in a training situation or in the training status to where when it comes to testing and comes to live people, you're extremely comfortable with it. Just like our OPAs and NPAs yesterday, I told you guys, here, play with these things and fiddle with them, figure out the limitations. So we can fail here in this safe to fail environment. So when we get into the real world, we've already have the reps that we need. Dealing with the death and dying. There's a statistic somewhere that states the average human being deals with maybe 3 to 4 close family members or relationships that have passed on in their lifetime. We, as first responders, deal with it on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So we have this constant stress of dealing with death and dying, and then being responsible for another human being's life. We, at the end of the day, that is our job, is to take care of another human being in their time of need. Reacting to stress. There's kind of 3 levels of this. There's something called a stress reaction, where it's this result from this acute stimulus into you that puts you in this like code black level stress, or your inability to react or think clearly. It's happened to me. I've had a couple pretty terrible calls to where I had to pull myself off the rig for a few hours and talk to the chaplain, just because it was something that I reacted to in that acute setting. I was able to bounce back to it and finish my shift, but there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that. Then you have your delayed stress reaction. This is going to be something that manifests itself over days, weeks, months. It's often known as PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. The newer way, or the way that we're trying to get it to be acknowledged now, is called PTSI, post-traumatic stress injury. And the idea is I can't fix a disorder, or if I have a disorder, you're just like, this is wrong with me, and this is what I have. Versus an injury, we can fix an injury. And there's a lot of funding going into mental health for first responders, military, and all sorts of other organizations that are really changing the culture of that stress reaction, or the idea of PTSD and PTSI. And then you have a cumulative stress reaction. This is that thing where it happens, and you're like, I'm fine, and you stick it in a box. And then another thing happens, and you stick that one in the box. And another thing happens, you stick that one in the box, and you start sticking all of these stressful events in this box. And then when this box gets full, we're really good at grabbing this box, sticking it in another box, and trying to get rid of it. Well, eventually that box overflows, and you can have this cumulative stress reaction. And it's not a single event that causes this reaction, but it's the accumulation of stress and being through these events over years and years and years and years. It's important to unpack that when you can. Symptoms of the stress reaction. We kind of talked about this. Irritability, lack of focus, difficulty sleeping or nightmares, anxiety, indecisiveness, guilt, increased appetite, decreased sexual drive, isolation, and a loss of interest in your work. It's okay to go through these things, but you have to get it addressed. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to seek a counselor. It's okay to talk to your peers if you feel safe with them. You have to have these discussions. Some of my best mini debriefings on critical incidences have been just me with my partner in the rig as I'm typing my paperwork. We get back to the station, and I'm like, dude, that sucked. And he's like, I agree with you, that did suck. And we had a conversation for about 45 minutes to an hour, just offloading all of the stuff that we're feeling. That's, in my opinion, one of the best ways to get that stuff off your chest. But if you need more help, you don't need a licensed psychiatrist or psychologist. If you have a good buddy that you can have a conversation with that will receive that information, it's beyond helpful. Stress management. So how do we manage stress? What do you guys do to manage your stress? Diet, exercise, relax if you can, avoid self-medicating, avoid drinking yourself into the ground. I don't disagree with drinking. I think that having a few drinks every so often to enjoy yourself is absolutely okay. But if you're drinking a handle on your off days because you want to obliterate yourself because it helps you sleep, not recommended. Attempt to find balance. Spiritual health, if you believe in a higher power and that helps you, believe in that higher power. And ultimately, if you need the help, there's always a suicide hotline, 988. There's your partner that you can go to. There's BetterHelp. There's really no reason for you not to be able to find someone that will listen to you. And if you guys need anyone to listen to you, I will listen to you. I understand that I'm putting you guys out in clinical rotations. I understand that we're putting you guys out on ambulances. If you have a bad call or something happens in the ER or something's bothering you, just come grab me. Hey, Johnny, I had this tough call. Sounds great. I will drop everything. I'll close my computer. I will sit here and listen to you if that's what you need. And I mean that. I'm here for you guys during this whole thing. Critical incident stress management or critical incident stress debriefing. This generally happens between 24 and 72 hours of a critical incident. What happens is they bring in a bunch of peer counselors and mental health professionals to speak to everyone that's on that incident to help debrief them and assist them with their healing process. There's 7 phases. They're going to review the facts of the incident. They're going to allow the personnel to share their feelings. They're going to identify any signs and symptoms they might be experiencing. They're going to allow them to sort through their feelings with emotional or with mental health personnel. They're going to receive suggestions to overcome those challenges, develop a plan for them to get back to work, and then obtain any follow-up assistance. So diseases. What are diseases in your mind? Ebola is one of them, things that make you sick, these little microscopic things that attack us. Here are some of the more common ones. A pathogen is a microscopic organism found in the environment around you or in the patient we are interacting with. Bacteria is a microscopic single-celled organism that can reproduce on their own. Generally, antibiotics are effective with your bacteria. And some of the causes or some of the processes would be a sinus infection, an ear infection, strep throat, or any type of urinary tract infection or UTI. Your viruses, they're smaller than a bacteria, but they require a host in order for them to reproduce. Generally, what will happen is that virus gets into your system, hops onto your cell, reproduces, gets back onto more cells, and reproduces to spread the infection. Antibiotics are not effective on viruses. This could be your common cold, your flu, COVID-19 was a virus, your hepatitis, and RSV. Your fungi, these are plant-like organisms. They typically don't cause infections in healthy people, but for immunocompromised people, they can present atypical presentations. So someone who's immunocompromised could get a pneumonia or other respiratory issue or illness because of these fungi. Protozoas. They're these single-cell organisms typically found in soil. They generally enter the body through fecal-oral route. So as I'm digging in the soil and I get poop in my fingernails, and I go home and I eat food without washing my hands, you are susceptible to getting a protozoa. These also generally don't affect healthy people, but the immunocompromised patient is more susceptible to this type of thing. And then your helminths. These are your parasitic worms. These are your tapeworms, roundworms, flukes. They're typically ingested through contaminated food or water. So whatever the food or water that you're eating or drinking has the worm eggs on there, and then they get into your body and system and grow. Does anyone know what the worm is called that goes to your brain that comes off of pork? Trichinosis. Trichinosis. So for the longest time, people were worried about their pork being uncooked because of trichinosis. It's less common now because the way that our food is prepared is much safer. Standard precautions. OSHA requires emergency personnel to wear a standard set of precautions to protect themselves from the transmission of infectious diseases from other people to them, or from them to other people. It was once known as BSI, or body substance isolation. OSHA requires your employers to provide you that safety equipment, and then also wash your hands. Washing your hands is like the #1 way to prevent the spread of illness and disease, so please wash your hands whenever you get the chance. Personal protective equipment. What are some types of PPE? Eyes, gloves, gowns, masks. What else? Hard hats, turnouts if you're in a fire capacity, leather gloves if you're working with cars or sharp objects. Yeah, steel-toed boots. Those are all different types of PPE. Pro tips. Use disposable equipment if you can. It helps reduce the spread of disease. If you have reusable equipment, wash it as soon as possible. What is one thing almost every patient interaction uses, and it goes from the house to the ambulance and from the ambulance to the hospital? The gurney. Absolutely. So please clean your gurneys all 17 times in one day if you have to, because that's how you get other people sick. Also, if you don't have a germ OCD, you probably will shortly after this class. For a long time, when I was on a private ambulances and even when I got onto the department, my first probably 10 minutes was I was wiping down the entire front cab and seat belts and radios and steering wheels with a disinfectant wipe, just because, one, I didn't get sick, but people are disgusting. Clean blood and fluid as soon as possible. I think I've told you about my blood stripe. If I haven't, on one of my calls, I had a bunch of blood on my hands and my arms. My hair was a little bit longer, and I wiped my forehead, and I had blood on my forehead. That wasn't mine. Extremely disgusting. When you guys can, wash your uniforms with hot soapy water, and then try not to bring your boots into your home. All of your boots right now have been everywhere that you've gone, and everywhere that you've gone, it has come into this classroom. Does that make sense? So one thing that I would recommend to you guys is carry a little 10-cent bag or the new grocery bags. Take your boots off at the beginning or at the end of your shift. Put your boots in that bag. Put that bag in your trunk, and then put your regular shoes on, and try not to let any of your gross uniform stuff in that like passenger space compartment. It just helps decrease the spread of any grossness that might be coming to you guys. And I did that religiously for the last 15 years. My boots never came home. My boots either were at the station or in my car, and that was a huge thing for me. Types of cleaning. There's 3 different levels of cleaning, which is washing with mild soap and water. There's disinfecting, which is using a disinfectant wipe, such as a Clorox wipe or one of the Lysol wipes. There's something called Cavicide that is stronger than both of those that a lot of your hospitals and ambulances carry. And then there's sterilization. Sterilization is using a chemical or heat to kill every microorganism on top of or in and around that piece of equipment, and then it's sealed in a packaging. So you know something's sterilized if it's sealed. If it's clean, we just wiped it down with mild soap and water, and if we disinfected it, we wiped it down with an antimicrobial wipe. So vaccinations. A lot of the organizations that you may or may not go to require certain vaccinations. This is just to help keep us healthy as providers. You might have to get a tetanus vaccination. You might have to get your Hep B, which is about a 2 or 3 series, influenza annually, your MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella, your varicella, which is your chickenpox, and some agencies still require COVID-19. The longer the process has been since COVID-19, it looks like less organizations are requiring it. My opinion is I don't care whether you got it or not. I support you either way for whatever your beliefs are. Just when you go to your organization, double check with them what their requirements are, and you might be able to sign a declination for some of these or all of these. So talk to your hiring process or their HR as you start applying to places. So wellness principles. We have our physical well-being and our mental well-being. What are some good physical well-being things that we can do? Working out, staying fit, right? What else? Watching what we eat. Our diet was huge. I am an emotional eater. Absolutely. But it's one of those things to where you have to understand that limitation. But fitness, right? So we have to stay physically fit. And I'm not saying you guys need to go do CrossFit or marathons or triathlons, but stay physically fit. And that could be a walk. Sometimes you guys will see me out back between 5 and 6 o'clock doing my 20-minute walk. On my long lecture days where I can't get into the gym, I'll go walk for 20 minutes. It's just to get outside and get moving. Yoga or whatever you choose to do your thing, just move your body. Adequate sleep. This is one of the things that is extremely important, but I think we neglect it. We have this like grind culture thing, and you're like, I only need 3 hours of sleep a day. You're like, is this conducive to health? Is this sustainable? The biggest thing with that is, in a perfect world, we should be getting 8 hours of sleep. How is that actually obtainable? Especially in your guys' specific situation right now as students trying to work, live life, and come to class. In addition to that, you have to study. I'm not a scientist. I listen to a couple scientists on podcasts, but it sounds like The consistency of your sleep is almost as important or more important than the quantity of sleep. So if I have the exact same downtime and awake time consistently over the week, it's supposed to be as effective or similarly effective, or at least better than the sporadic sleep, but also trying to get the 8 hours. 8 hours is recommended. Is it truly achievable? I don't know. Also, if we're doing shift work where we don't get to dictate how much we get to sleep, is it truly obtainable? Probably not. So if you can, sleep when you can, but try to take care of your bodies in any way that's possible. Smoking cessation. It seems like smoking makes everything worse. My opinion is like it's 2024, vape like an adult. Just kidding. But even the smoking, vaping things, we shouldn't be doing those things. All right, it's just bad for our lungs. The way that I look at all of us is we're tactical athletes. I try to treat my body as an athlete would, because at any given day I could be hiking for 15 miles, I could be on the side of a freeway, or I could be lifting a 400-pound person. So I want my body to be ready for whatever it throws at me. We want to be able to run. We also want to be able to lift and take care of your body. Alcohol and drug-related issues. These are those same things, to where everything in moderation. I'm not going to stand on this hill and be like, you guys shouldn't drink ever at all. It's unrealistic, but everything in moderation. Also, too, if we think about the fire service, military, law enforcement, EMS, alcohol is a part of our culture. It truly is. And if you're the one that isn't drinking, you're kind of the weirdo, right? You're like, dude, I can't trust you if you don't drink. And you're like, well, I'll fight you. Like, we can do that. Will you trust me then? But it's one of those things to where be aware of it and try to do everything in moderation or in capacity. Mental well-being. Resilience. Resilience is the ability to cope with stress and adversity without suffering lasting physical or lasting psychological harm. That one's extremely difficult to do. The way that we become resilient is by working on it and working through it. For me, and I'll go here with you guys, I journal a lot. I will just sit and journal about sometimes on my good days, my bad days, good calls, bad calls, and that just helps me get it off of my mind and onto paper to where I can leave it where it's over there, so it doesn't keep me up at night. Counselors, this is your either peer counseling or your counselors are like your psychologists. I personally I'm not comfortable with calling them psychologists because that's what they are. I like calling them counselors, and it makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. But if you need a psychiatrist or a counselor, there's tons of resources out there. And if you're ever in that dark moment where you have nowhere else to go, no one else to call, there's always the 988. Do what you can to keep yourself mentally fit and physically fit. So in conclusion, we've talked about the emotional stages of grief, death and dying. We've discussed the effects of stress, how to manage stress, critical incident stress management or debriefing. We've talked about disease processes, standard precautions and PPE, cleaning techniques, EMT preventative health, and wellness principles. Any questions?